Sean, I mean, AVP yesterday said, yeah, rust is to be expected. Like, what, if anything, can you do to try to knock some of that off before Sunday?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's what we've been going through the last couple of weeks as he's been in the building, and certainly, this week of practice where he's getting a lot of the reps and trying to get extra reps with some of the guys to just build that trust and build that feeling where he knows how guys come in and out of breaks and where they're going to be in the route. And some of that's just conversation. Hey, what are you thinking at the top of this route, or what are you going to do versus this coverage? I think the more he can do that and has done that, I think it's going to help knock some of that off. So certainly, trying to push that over these last couple of weeks has been big.
Deshaun mentioned yesterday, getting up to speed with the receivers. Part of it was just being in the room and listening to how they were talking to Jacoby and both sides of the conversation. How important is that, and how underrated is that? What the receivers are saying back to the quarterback in those type of meetings and discussions.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, it's a big part of the passing game because there is a large portion of the passing game that's done with anticipation and trust. You're not going to see every break. You're not going to know exactly where that ball needs to be thrown if you haven't had those conversations. So on any given route, to understand, look, this is the way we may see it in the quarterback room, but if they see it a completely different way or are planning something different, we need to know that. And so that stuff needs to get ironed out during the week, and those conversations are really important so that guys can throw with anticipation, maybe before a guy even gets out of his break or before he sets the route up, just because we've had the conversation and maybe gotten a rep of it during practice.
He said he tried to stay locked in mentally when he wasn't here. Watched all your guys' games and tried to, kind of call it along or whatever, and watched a bunch of the defenses and how they reacted to you. Could you tell that when he got back in the meetings and on the practice field that he had really stayed that engaged when he was not here?
Yeah, I think so. I think you also saw it in the way that he attacked the playbook and his preparation during the offseason and during the early parts of training camp, but definitely was impressed with where he was mentally when he came back. Felt like even though we weren't working with him and he wasn't, getting the stuff day to day in the meeting rooms, that he still took a step and that he was doing a lot of work on his own to make sure that when he jumped back in, it was going to be as smooth a transition as possible.
You talked about, he obviously had the 3 series against Jacksonville, and yeah, it's preseason and all that, but how important is it that he has gone through at least some game? He mentioned it important, just hearing Kevin in the headset and all of that. How important is that, having gone through that already when you go into Sunday?
I think it's really important. I think it was a valuable experience for him, for Kevin, for all of us. As you just said, hearing his voice for the first time, breaking the huddle with these guys, looking at the right color on the jersey, all those things it's the first time you've done that. So having done that prior to playing in a regular season game, I think is really important. So I think he got a lot out of that.
And there's a lot that he's been dealing with, right, off the field and everything. Have you talked to him a bunch about just how he needs to handle whatever emotions that happened Sunday, especially being back in Houston?
Yeah, certainly and I talked about it even in the offseason, like first time he got out there with new teammates on a new field of and it's not necessarily bearing the emotions, it's being aware of them and understanding that they're going to be there. So you need to be ready for them. And if you haven't put any thought into them, they can catch you by surprise. But if you process them and say, hey, I know my adrenaline's going to be rolling, I'm going to feel pretty good, and see how that affects you at practice, see how that affects you in the Jacksonville game so that it doesn't catch you by surprise the first play of the game in Houston, I think is going to be important. I think he's done a really nice job of being aware of that and having those conversations and being ready for that.
Command of the huddle. Every quarterback probably has their own unique way of doing it. Have you noticed yet the difference between the way Deshaun commands a huddle and Jacoby, or is that something you won't really see until you get out there, Sunday and beyond?
I think we see it a little bit. I think it's probably more something the players would be able to talk about. That which I think that's the great part about this game for those guys is that's their huddle. I've never stood in the huddle with him. Certainly try to listen to hear him call the play, but in terms of making eye contact and breaking the huddle and going to the line of scrimmage, I think that's probably more a question for the players. But I think both those guys, Jacoby and Deshaun, it's something that they take a lot of pride in, even if they have certain things they do differently. So it's definitely a big part of our offense.
Deshaun talked about watching Jacoby and how he talks in the huddle and things like that. I guess just have you seen that, and how important I guess has that been as he gets ready to come back this week?
I think it's been big. I think one of the things, and I think we talked about this a little in the room and might have said something here about it, is Deshaun. It was a great opportunity to watch someone operate the way Jacoby operated. And Jacoby did such a great job of embracing the role and taking that leadership role. And Deshaun came into this league as a starter. So he's really never watched someone do that and saw it done from a guy who's been in the league and been around some guys who have done it at a really high level. So I think there was a lot of value in that. And I think it's something Deshaun put a lot of faith in, and certainly has a really good relationship with Jacoby, where he can say, like, hey, I saw you do this, or why are we doing that? And Jacoby can also be like, hey, just as a reminder, you may want to think about this as you break the, little things like that I think has been great for both of them.
When it comes to going to Houston, it would be a hostile environment you would expect, and there was a little bit of that in Jacksonville, but it's still preseason. Just from being around Deshaun now for a while, how do you think he is? How do you think he'll do handling something like that?
I think he'll do really well. I think one of the things that, and this is, everyone deals with it differently, but if you've come up in major college football and played in the NFL, some of those college environments are far more hostile than the NFL environments, especially in the ACC, the SEC, some of those big-time programs. So I would expect him to handle it really well. I think that's the great part about the sport. When you step between the lines, your focus can narrow. What you're trying to accomplish really narrows, and I think all the players really enjoy and embrace that opportunity.
Wyatt talked about, good luck putting 8 in the box, with Deshaun with Deshaun there. How much potential is there for this to kind of open things up for Nick, more running lanes for Nick? How much does it kind of stress the defense more than what even Jacoby could do, even though he was, effective running the football at times?
Yeah, I think there's certainly aspects of it that change. I think a lot of it is not going to, right? We're still going to run our offense. We're going to find things that the guys on the field do well. And if there's certain things Deshaun does better than Jacoby or different than Jacoby, we need to highlight those. But I think the foundation of who we are is still the Browns offense. And I think a lot of that will stay the same. And if people want to defend us differently, we need to react to that. But I don't think we're going to overreact until we see it. So I think we've done a lot of things really well. Certainly Nick and Kareem are very talented tailbacks, regardless of how many people they put in the box. So still going to be a big focus of who we are offensively.
Yesterday when Deshaun was talking, he mentioned it wasn't just about watching what you guys were doing, but he made a point to watch every starter in the league and opposing defenses. I guess just from your time getting to know him, how much is he like a football junkie, quote unquote? And I mean, obviously this is a different experience having to sit out and getting to watch everything.
Yeah, I think that's something that you noticed very quickly when he came in the building. Like, he's the type of guy that even in the off season, if you're sitting around the building at 3 o'clock and everybody's been gone for 2 hours, you might walk down there and he's watching a random game from a couple years ago, and he wants to talk about situational football, the end of the game, what decisions, what plays were called, why they were called, how we manage the clock, what our thought process is. I think that's a big part of his process, and I think he loves the game, but I also think he sees the value in it in terms of hey, the more I can understand about why things are happening or what we're calling or what we're trying to accomplish. And you can't always put yourself in those situations just from your own games, because you may never have been in that 2-minute or 4-minute situation or been in a game where those things were happening. So definitely felt that right away in terms of the way he attacked his job.
Part of coaching Jacoby. I mean, guys said so many nice things about him after that game Sunday. So what's your favorite part?
God, that would be a long list. He's been a lot of fun to coach and just get to know as a person. I think similar to Deshaun and what we just talked about, he loves the game of football. He loves to talk about it. He loves to work at it. He loves the leadership aspect of it. There's very few parts of the game that you would say he isn't 110% I love this. And I think as a coach, when you get a player like that, it's really fun. Because obviously if you chose to do this for a living as a coach, it's something you really enjoy and can connect with the players on. So I think that above, there's a number of other things, but that's definitely something that stood out to me in terms of our relationship and getting to know him and work with him.
How's Deshaun made you a better quarterback coach?
I think he pushes you. Anytime you get a guy with his level of ability who wants the knowledge of the game that he craves, you got to be on you got to be on top of stuff. So it pushes me to try to find him the extra edge and try to take him to the next level. Look, he's a talented player, but can he be better? And it's my job to try to find those areas and push him in those areas. And I think he has certainly embraced that coaching, which for me has been great, but it also has definitely pushed me as a coach to make sure I'm on top of it.
Intense job, on-the-job training you could have imagined, I guess, when you got elevated into this role?
Yes and no. I mean, if you look around, in my career and a lot of guys' career, it's a little bit the nature of the NFL. It's always something, right? You're always dealing with different situations and different players and different attitudes and different locker rooms. And I think it's what makes it fun. And because it's a lot of guys with a lot of different goals all coming together to try to do one thing. And I think anytime you do that in any organization, it creates challenges, but it's also a lot of fun.